It wasn't the headlights I noticed first. It was the silence after the engine cut. The way the highway hummed just stopped, leaving only my own breathing and the rain hammering the gravel shoulder like it had something personal against me. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been sitting in the passenger seat of a Honda I still owed payments on, watching my husband's jaw work the way it did when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. We were 40 miles outside Asheville on a 2-lane road that nobody takes unless they're avoiding the interstate, and he was avoiding the interstate because he didn't want anyone to see what he was about to do. "You can't keep doing this," he said, showing up at my work, calling my mother, crying. I had a 6-day-old baby in a car seat in the back. I want you to hold on to that detail, because I keep coming back to it myself. 6 days. We'd brought her home from Mission Hospital on a Tuesday, and it was now a Sunday night, and I was still bleeding, still wearing the kind of pad they give you at the hospital, still moving like every part of me had been taken apart and put back wrong. "I'm not crying," I said, even though I was. He pulled over. I thought he needed to check something, a tire, a text. Then he leaned across me and opened my door from the inside, which is a thing I didn't know. A door could feel like a betrayal with a mechanism. Get her and get out. I laughed. It came out wrong, more like a cough. "It's raining." "Then you should hurry." I told myself he didn't mean it. I'd been telling myself versions of that for 3 years. He doesn't mean it. He's tired. He's stressed. The baby's keeping him up. His job is hard. His father was hard on him. He doesn't mean it. I unbuckled. I climbed into the back, which took longer than it should have because my body wasn't mine yet, and I lifted the car seat with my daughter sleeping inside it, and I stepped out onto the shoulder thinking he would change his mind the second the cold air hit him. He reached back, pulled the door shut, and drove off. The taillights got small. I stood there holding a sleeping infant in a plastic bucket seat with a thin blanket over her, and the rain was the kind that doesn't fall so much as arrive all at once, from every direction. My phone was in my purse. My purse was on the floor of the front seat, where I'd set it down 40 miles ago like a person who assumed she'd be getting out of the car at home. So, no phone, no money, no coat that deserved the name. A diaper bag still in the trunk because I'd packed it for the drive and never thought to grab it. I had on leggings and a nursing tank, and my husband's old college sweatshirt, which I'd worn because it was the only thing that didn't hurt against my stitches and which now weighed about 30 pounds with water. I started walking. I don't know why I picked the direction I picked. Toward Asheville, I think, on instinct, though I couldn't have told you how far. The baby woke up and started crying. That brand new cry that doesn't sound like anything yet, just air and need, and I tucked the blanket tighter and kept the seat against my chest and walked on the white line at the edge of the road because the gravel kept turning my ankles. Maybe 4 cars passed. They slowed down, you know. They slow down enough to see you, and then they speed up. A woman alone in the rain at night reads as a problem, and people are very good at deciding a problem isn't theirs. The 5th car didn't speed up. It was an old pickup, a Ford, the green kind that's mostly rust by now, and it pulled onto the shoulder ahead of me with its hazards going. I stopped. Every part of me that grew up being warned about exactly this lit up at once. A truck on an empty road, a man getting out. I shifted the car seat to put my body between it and whoever this was, which is funny because what was I going to do exactly? He didn't come at me. He stopped about 10 feet off in the rain, hands where I could see them, the way you'd approach a dog that's been kicked. "Ma'am," he said, "you got a baby." It wasn't a question, but I answered it. "Yes." "You hurt?" "No." "A lie." "I'm fine." He looked at me for a long second. He was older, maybe 60, with a face like weathered furniture, and he had a feed cap soaked black and a flannel that was losing the same fight my sweatshirt was. "Ma'am," he said again, gentler, "ain't nobody fine out here tonight. There's a blanket behind my seat that's dry and there's heat in the cab. I'll stand right here while you decide. But that baby's getting cold and so are you, and I'd hate myself if I drove off. I'd hate myself if I drove off. I think that's the sentence that did it. Because somebody had just driven off and clearly hadn't hated himself at all. I got in the truck. He got the blanket, handed it to me without touching me or the baby, and went around to the driver's side. He cranked the heat. He didn't ask me anything for almost a mile. He just drove slow and let the cab warm up and let me get my daughter out of the wet seat and wrapped in the dry blanket against my skin, where she stopped crying almost immediately, which made me cry harder, because of course she just wanted to be warm and held. Of course that was all it ever takes, and her father couldn't manage even that. "Name's Hollis," he finally said, eyes on the road. "I farm out past Weaverville. I was coming back from my brother's. You don't have to tell me a thing. But there's a hospital 20 minutes up, or there's a sheriff's station, or there's a diner that's open all night with a lady named Roberta who'll feed you and not ask questions. Your call. I'll take you to whichever." "I don't have any money," I said. It was the first true thing I'd said to him. "Didn't ask you for any." I started to shake then, the real shaking, the kind that comes after the danger and not during it. He turned the heat up another notch and said nothing else. "And I am telling you, a stranger in a rusted-out truck showed me more decency in 10 silent minutes than I'd gotten in 3 years of marriage." And somewhere in that warm, dark cab, a small, mean voice in my head finally stopped making excuses for the man who'd left me. I asked for the diner. Roberta took one look at me and the baby and the puddle I was making on her floor, and she came around the counter so fast her apron snapped. She put us in a back booth, brought me dry kitchen towels and a cup of coffee I didn't ask for, and a plate of eggs I didn't ask for either, and she warmed a clean rag and helped me clean the baby up while Hollis sat at the counter, giving us space, working on a slice of pie like a man with all the time in the world. It was Roberta who asked the question that turned everything. "Honey," she said low, "so it stayed between us. Is there somebody we should call family?" And I realized I had nobody. My mother had died when I was 7. My father had died 2 years after that. I'd been raised by an aunt who did her duty and not 1 ounce more, and who'd told me at my wedding that I was lucky any man would take on a girl with no people. I had a husband who'd just put me out on a highway. I had a 6-day-old daughter, and I had, sitting in my own name, exactly nothing, because he handled the money, all of it, every account, every card, every password, the way I'd thought was just easier, and now understood was the whole point. "There's no one," I said. Roberta nodded like she'd heard it before, which I imagined she had. "Then he'll let me make some calls," she said. "Not the kind you're scared of. There's a women's shelter in town. Good people. They'll have a bed and they'll have somebody who knows how this works." She squeezed my hand. "You are not the first woman to come through that door wet, and the ladies who run it didn't either." I want to skip ahead now, because the next part wasn't dramatic, it was just slow. The shelter took us in that night. They gave me a room with a crib in it, and the lock on the door I controlled. In the morning, a caseworker named Dina sat with me, and a legal aid attorney came on Tuesday, and I learned a string of things I should have known and didn't, because I'd let myself be kept stupid about my own life on purpose. I learned that in North Carolina, I was entitled to a share of what we'd built, even though it was all in his name, because we'd built it married. I learned that abandonment is a thing the law has a word for. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and out of a vehicle on a public road at night could be charged, and that there was a 911 call I should make and police reports I should file, and that I'd been so busy surviving that I hadn't even thought of myself as someone things had been done to. The attorney, a woman named Priya, who couldn't have been 5 years older than me, leaned across the table at legal aid and said something I've never forgotten. "You keep saying you don't want to make trouble. Honey, the trouble already happened. You're just deciding now whether you're the only one who pays for it." So I made the call. I filed the report. I gave them the location, the time, the mile marker I'd memorized without meaning to. And then I sat in a borrowed room and nursed my daughter and waited to feel powerful, the way you think you will, and instead I just felt tired and scared and like I'd set something in motion I couldn't stop. Here's the part I didn't see coming. About 3 weeks in, Dina knocked on my door and said there was a man at the front desk asking for me by name. My whole body went cold. I thought it was him. It wasn't. It was Hollis, the farmer, cap in his hands, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. "Roberta told me where you landed. I won't stay." He shifted his weight. "It's just, my wife passed 2 years back. We never could have kids. There's a lot of house out there, and not much in it." He cleared his throat hard. My granddaughter's got a whole nursery of baby things she's done with. Crib, clothes, one of them swings. My niece runs a daycare in town, says she's got a spot, no charge, for as long as you need it to get on your feet. I'm not trying to be anybody to you. I just thought somebody ought to be on your side who isn't getting paid to be. I'd spent 3 years with a man who never once did a single thing for me without keeping a ledger. And here was a stranger I'd met in the rain, offering me a crib and childcare and standing in a doorway terrified I'd think he wanted something for it. I let him help. It took me a while to be able to, but I did. The case took 8 months. My husband fought it, of course. Hired a lawyer, told a story about how I'd asked to be let out after an argument, and for about a day that story scared me. Until Priya pointed out that you don't ask to be let out 40 miles from home in a downpour, 6 days after a C-section with no phone and no coat. The diner had cameras. Roberta had kept the footage. There was a record of which urgent care I'd checked into for the infection I developed from being soaked through with open stitches. There was a timeline, and the timeline did what timelines do, which is refuse to bend for the convenience of liars. We settled before it went to trial. I'm Robert Sinclair, 6 City, 7 years old, and I'm Robert Sinclair, 6 City, 7 years old, and I'm Robert Sinclair, 6 City, 7 years old, and Blake got child support that an actual judge set, not a number he handed me like an allowance, and I got a thing I hadn't known to ask for, which was the official, on-the-record acknowledgement that what happened on that road happened, that I hadn't dreamed it or earned it or asked for it. He's not in our lives. He had supervised visits he didn't bother to keep, and after a while, the not bothering became the official arrangement. I used to think a girl needs her father. Then I remembered I lost mine at 9 and turned out able to love a stranger in a truck for showing me basic kindness, so maybe what a girl needs is just one person who won't drive off. She has that. She has several now. My daughter is 4. She calls Hollis Pop, which started as a joke and turned into the truest thing in our family. Roberta sends a birthday card every year with a $20 bill that I keep telling her she doesn't have to, and she keeps doing it anyway. Dina still texts me on the anniversary of my intake date, just the word "look how far," nothing else. Priya invited us to her own wedding 2 summers ago, and my daughter was the flower girl, and I cried through the whole thing for reasons I never fully explained to anyone there. I'm Robert Sinclair, 6 City, 7 years old, and 20 minutes from Pop's farm with a fixed-rate mortgage in my own name and a savings account he has no access to and no password he set. I went back to school for my dental hygienist license, which I'd quit when I got married because he said it looked bad for his wife to work, and I make my own money now, and the first time I covered a car repair without asking anyone for permission. I sat in the parking lot and laughed out loud. People ask me sometimes, when this comes up, whether I'm angry. They expect a revenge story. They want me to say I made him suffer. The truth is plainer than that, and I think harder. The man who left me on that road lost more than the house and the money. He lost the only 2 people who ever would have loved him without a reason, and he's the only one who'll never understand that was the actual price. I didn't have to do anything to him. I just had to stop drowning long enough to notice that someone had pulled over. It's been raining all morning as I write this. My daughter's at the window with her hands flat on the glass, watching it come down, and a minute ago she turned around and said, "Mama, somebody could get stuck in that." And I told her, "Yes, baby, somebody could." And then I told her what you do is, you stop the car. For a long time I believed the rain that night was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I think it might have been the most honest. It washed away every excuse I'd been making, every story I'd told myself about a man who was tired or stressed or just having a hard year. You can't keep pretending in weather like that. The cold tells you the truth about who's willing to stand in it with you. I keep coming back to the difference between 2 men on the same stretch of road. One had everything I'd handed him, my trust, my money, the keys to my whole life. And he used the warm, dry inside of a car to push a bleeding new mother out into the dark. The other had a rusted truck and a wife in the ground and almost nothing, and he stopped. Hollis didn't stop because it was easy or because anyone was watching. He stopped because of something he carried inside himself that wouldn't let him do otherwise. That's the thing I want my daughter to understand someday. The size of what you have means nothing. The size of what you're willing to give when no one's keeping score means everything. I used to think being a good wife meant staying quiet and letting someone else hold the map. I confused helplessness with kindness. What changed me wasn't just Hollis pulling over. It was sitting across from Priya and finally letting myself learn the things I'd been kept from on purpose. What I was owed, what the law called what had been done to me. How money actually worked when it wasn't being used as a leash. Knowing those things didn't make me hard, it made me free. There is a kind of clear-eyed understanding that protects you better than any man ever promised to, and I'd been talked out of wanting it for years, and none of it would have mattered if I'd stayed on that shoulder waiting to be rescued forever. The shelter gave me a bed, but I had to get up out of it. Dina opened a door, but I had to walk through it scared, filing that report, going back to school for my license, signing a mortgage in my own name with my own hand shaking. Every one of those took a kind of stubborn refusal to drown that I didn't know I had until the water was at my chin. So if you're listening to this in some version of that rain, soaked through and certain no one's coming, I need you to hear me. Stop waiting to feel strong before you move. The strength shows up after. Hold on to your decency even when the world hasn't earned it. Keep learning the things people would rather you didn't know and put one foot down, then the next. Somebody pulled over for me, but I'm the one who got in the truck.